Hello and welcome to part 2 of this Flash retrospective. Last time we went over seasons 1 through 5 and went over what's good and what's bad about them. Mostly bad, but I digress. Today we're going to be going through seasons 6 to 8 and all the storylines contained within them. There's a lot, so let's just jump into it. So, Season 6 actually brings a change in format. Instead of having one season-long villain, they decided to split the season into multiple shorter stories, which the showrunner calls graphic novels. This season also ended up airing in late 2019, which meant that near the end of the season, it ended up getting shut down due to COVID. 19 of the planned episodes were released, and the last 3 episodes of Season 6 had to be aired during Season 7. Due to the split in seasons and storytelling, from this point onwards, I'm going to be covering the individual villain arcs instead of the entire seasons. That being said, I will now delve into the first villain of these graphic novels. Season 6 started off with Ramsey Russo, or Bloodwork, as the villain. Seeing as Season 5 ended with the crisis being pushed forward, the first 8 episodes of Season 6 built towards Barry's impending doom. The arc was paralleled with Ramsey's arc of trying to fight death and live forever. Was this theme spelled out to the audience?
The power to strike down death. Life eternal. The grand miracle at your command. Save the world and live. Have all you want.
Kinda. But it is in my favorite episode of the season and possibly my favorite episode of the whole show, so I am biased towards saying that it wasn't too bad. These 8 episodes are some of the best, and honestly, in its entirety, I think that Season 6 was really good. The decision to tell multiple story arcs in a season was genius. Ramsey's story is able to progress in a really good way during these 8 episodes. In episode 1, he is looking to use dark matter to cure HLH cancer, as it killed his mother, and he has genetic markers that may be HLH. In the process, he gives himself powers. In episode 2, he works to get more dark matter, and ends up killing someone with his powers by accident. But his powers didn't just kill the person, it turned them into an undead zombie with a craving for dark matter. In episode 3, he learns that he can control the zombies, and that the blood produced in the zombies is enough to cure his HLH. In episode 4, he learns that he needs epinephrine to create the blood, so he ends up having to scare and kill people in order to cure himself. Following episode 4, he devolves further into his own delusions, eventually seeing himself as the cure for death itself, and he plots to share his blood with everyone in the city, so that way they would never die. In 8 episodes, they are able to realistically expand and change his goal, which is great considering some of the other villains. They also sort of fix the fact that Barry would be able to instantly stop him, by having Barry only fight him twice. To be completely fair, Barry should have stopped Ramsey in episode 4. Barry had him dead to rights, but he tried to reason with him. Of course, it's also sort of understandable, considering the fact that in that episode, Barry was trying to cure his HLH and save him, so Barry was hoping that he would be able to talk Ramsey out of killing anyone else. There was no excuse, however, when Ramsey killed this doctor and then ran away. Barry should have followed Ramsey, especially because Frost was there and she would have more medical experience. Anyways, episode 7 is my favorite episode, possibly ever. In this episode, Ralph gets infected by Ramsey's blood, and Barry has to give him a blood transfusion so that he would live. But, in doing so, Barry gets infected. In the rest of the episode, Barry is shown hallucinations while his speed healing tries to fight off the infection. Another subplot for these 8 episodes was the incoming crisis, and that Barry needs to prepare the team for a world where he's gone. Episode 3 centers around Barry training Frost, Episode 4 was Cisco, Episode 5 was a fully Cisco-centric episode, and Episode 6 was about Ralph. All the while, Barry was shown to have come to terms with his impending death, but in Episode 7, all of the hallucinations are about Barry's doubts. Barry sees a room filled with gravestones of all the people who died throughout the show. He sees a baby version of Nora and tries to pick her up, but he doesn't get to. Then, he gets another vision where he does get to hold her. It was honestly really emotional. All of it fell into Ramsey's plan to heal as many people as possible. He tries to get Barry to allow himself to be infected so that he wouldn't die in crisis, but Barry fights back on the notion that everything Ramsey is saying is a lie. The Speed Force then comes in and reveals that Ramsey isn't lying, but he's twisting the truth. This leads to a confrontation where Barry's emotions about not wanting to die in crisis, along with Ramsey's infection, boil over, and Barry pulls a reverse flash and phases his hand through the Speed Force. They did this awesome thing where the Speed Force does the same cry that his mother did that night, and it flashes between Barry and Thawne. It was a great parallel. In the end, Barry ends up giving in to the infection, and he becomes Dark Flash during episode 8. I do think the way they undid Ramsey's infection was a bit contrived and convenient, but then Barry fights Ramsey. Ramsey turns into this big blood monster and Barry fights him. Barry knocks him down, and then Ramsey gets up and traps Barry. But even then, Barry uses his connection to Ramsey through the infection to bring out Ramsey's doubts about his goals, and while Ramsey is distracted, Barry phases through the restrictions and traps Ramsey. I especially love the arc because it shows that Barry is at the top of his game. In episode 1, we see a clone of Godspeed attacking Central City, and Barry takes him out pretty easily. Barry is also able to go up against the giant Bloodwork on his own. It really shows the Flash as a hero that is efficient and gets the job done. The arc is capped off with a scene where everyone on Team Flash talks to Barry and tells them how he changed their lives, or how they're happy to be friends, and be on Team Flash and everything. It was another moment that really got to me. The episode then ends with a crisis beginning. The crisis is a whole other story that I'm not going to go into, but obviously, considering there are 2.5 more seasons after this, Barry doesn't die in crisis. That being said, what ends up happening is that the universe is reset, and there are a bunch of changes to the world. With that out of the way, I think that Blood and Truth is the best villain arc since Zoom, and honestly, I would go as far as saying that this is better than Season 2, and I think it's my favorite villain arc that the show has had. This story kicks off at the end of episode 10. In the first story arc, Iris and her team at Central City Citizen were looking into some metas who disappeared and followed a trail that led them to a secret organization. In this episode, Iris tracks down a new member of the organization due to a whistleblower, who is then killed. She investigates this and ends up getting pulled into a mirror where she spends the majority of the season. There are sort of two villains during this arc. The main villain is Eva McCulloch. On the night of the particle accelerator explosion, she was tossed into the Mirrorverse where she spent 6 years alone trying to escape, until Iris ended up getting pulled in as well. Of course, it's eventually revealed that Eva pulled her in and she has been orchestrating events to ensure her escape. The other villain, villain group, is Black Hole, a terrorist organization led by Joseph Carver. The funny thing about Carver is his actor. By no means is the actor bad, but he is so incredibly miscast. There is a moment in episode 16 where Carver hires Ragdoll to kill Joe, and my guy literally says,
"Kill him, please."
His tone is so soft, it's so polite. He can be threatening and he isn't a bad actor, but it's moments like this that make it hard to see him as a real threat, when he's so politely asking villains to go and fucking murk someone. Episode 19 does a great job at course-correcting this. He is not polite or anything. He is serious, and that makes for a much better antagonist to follow. There was a really good balance between how much time we spent with Eva and how much time we spent with Black Hole. Episodes 10, 12, 15, and 16 were mostly about Black Hole, and episodes 11 to 13 show Eva and Iris working together to try to escape, while episodes 14 and 17 fully focus on Eva's real plan. And episode 15 also has some intervention from Eva. Both stories get 4 or 5 episodes to shine before they end up colliding in episode 19. This storyline also had a lot more going on in the background. There was a lot of fallout from the crisis. Since the world was different, there were some points where characters would be feeling upset and frustrated about things that changed. In episode 10, Cisco was feeling really terrible because there are now a bunch of villains that are free and roaming around, because the multiverse was rebooted. Harry and Jesse are gone, and even if they are alive, they don't know any of Team Flash anymore because they never explore the multiverse. In episode 13, Barry can't find his parents' graves because the world is different. Not to mention, the new Wells for the season has all of the multiversal Wells variants in his mind. This also includes Thawne, which opened up the opportunity for a return. Also, because of Crisis, the Speed Force ended up dying, which put Barry on a limited amount of speed for the rest of the season. Their plan to fix this is to create an artificial Speed Force. From episode 14 onwards, Barry has to rely less on his speed and more of his brain, which also means that he ended up being too slow to stop certain things. With all of these things mixed together, in addition to the villain plots, there was a hell of a lot going on during this arc. To be completely honest, I've seen a lot of people say that Eva is a boring villain or that the story was confusing, but I don't see any of those criticisms. The story, albeit stuffed, is straightforward, and while Eva isn't the most engaging or threatening villain, she serves her purpose, at least until the end, but I'll get there. Each villain during this arc has a completely different goal, and it was really interesting to see a set of villains that actually went against each other. It ended up being a sort of three-way battle the whole time, considering Carver and Eva wanted each other gone, and Team Flash ended up having to deal with both parties. Carver, in the end, was just a power-hungry person. He had Black Hole, he had fame, he wanted nothing to stand in his way. But Eva wanted freedom, so she could stop Carver and seize control of his operations. He had meta-slaves working for him, and she wanted to set them free, although she did a terrible job at it. She works towards her goals until episode 17, where Barry first figures out that something is happening, and Eva finally makes her first full move, escaping the Mirrorverse. Following that, episode 19 is when Eva takes her next big step, fully targeting Carver. Barry and the team try to protect him, but Eva ends up sending a shard of glass through Barry and into Carver. After this episode, we end up dipping into Season 7, but it's the same storyline. Episodes 1 to 3 of Season 7 are episodes 20 to 22 of Season 6, and I'm going to be referring to them as such. Episode 20 is dedicated to getting the artificial Speed Force to work. In order to do so, Wells has to sacrifice himself to use the multiversal particles inside of him as a power source. The multiversal particles are there because of the other Wells in his brain. This leads to some drama about Wells wanting to live and trying to work around the sacrifice, which ends up putting the multiversal particles into Barry. Barry then ends up acting like the Wells we met throughout the series. It's fun, and they actually brought back a joke from Season 5 that works pretty well. In that season, it was really annoying because they kept on saying it, but this time, it's only used once. The running joke was that nobody on Team Flash would pronounce Sherlock Wells' name correctly. They would always say Sherlock or Sherlock, but it was pronounced Sherlock. So a lot of the time, Wells would correct them on how to say it, but they never ended up saying it right. This time, the joke is that Wells is saying it wrong, and Chester and Allegra say it correctly. It's a fun twist, and it's only mentioned once, so it's not overused.
Good. No, great.
Anyways, Wells does end up sacrificing himself, and they get the artificial Speed Force working just on time to save the city from a bomb. In the next episode, another one of my favorites from the season, if not the show, we get to see Barry learn a new ability, Super Speed Thinking, which is a god-awful name because it's way too long, so I'm just going to call it Speed Thinking. During this episode, the artificial Speed Force gives Barry this new power, which lets him analyze everything and think at super speed. Essentially, they squished DeVoe's entire power and villain arc into one episode, and they made it work perfectly. At first, Barry is able to understand exactly what Cisco is going to say before he says it, which then leads to them testing the new ability by using a ball that bounces around unpredictably. Barry is able to predict it, and he figures out how to save everyone from the Mirrorverse. Eventually, though, the more Barry uses his speed thinking, the more he loses touch with his emotions. At first, the team ends up using the tachyon device to collect particles they can use to open a portal. Barry lets Frost get injured because there was a 0.0002% chance of the tachyon device getting damaged if he intervened. After that, Barry just keeps getting worse. He realizes that with the particles they collected, they could either save Iris or save Camilla, Cisco's girlfriend, and Captain Singh. Barry's lack of emotions make him think that it would be better to save Iris just because she has more knowledge on Eva, which would make her more useful. He goes behind the team's back to free Iris, which ends him in a confrontation where Barry is able to beat all of Team Flash. The great part about this battle is that Barry clearly uses his speed thinking against them, but that doesn't make him invulnerable. Cisco was able to hit Barry with a speed dampening agent by targeting the artificial speed force. Frost and Allegra are able to team up and get Barry back to Star Labs by using Velocity X and one of Wells' teleporting devices. But even after all that, Barry is still able to beat them because he uses the unpredictable ball to hit them into attacking each other. In the end, Barry forces Iris out of the Mirrorverse and she collapses, causing Barry to snap out of his emotionless trance and destroy the artificial speed force. After this, we flash back to Season 1 when Thawne killed Wells and took his body. We see Thawne bury Wells, but then some particles form a new body and revive Wells. We now get to meet Earth-1 Harrison Wells for the first time. Now, this sets up a lot for the finale. It's the last episode of the story arc, which means that it needs to balance stopping Eva, getting everyone out of the Mirrorverse, getting Iris to wake up, and getting Barry his speed back without turning him into Defoe. There's also another storyline that needs to be finished, and that's the one with Ralph and Sue. I didn't mention them because they didn't end up contributing to the arc all that much, but during Season 6, Ralph had a storyline centering around Sue Dearborn. She was a missing person who Ralph found and then proceeded to team up with. She was looking to take down Black Hole, and Ralph wanted to help, but he got betrayed, and then still offered to help her afterwards. In the end, Sue got framed for a lot of Black Hole's crimes. That was one of the cliffhangers between episodes 19 and 20. However, during the break between Season 6's ending and Season 7, Ralph's actor ended up getting fired due to old tweets he made. This meant that Ralph couldn't really be in the rest of the storyline, considering he wasn't there to film new scenes. Because of this, they shelved that storyline until the very last episode of the arc. Now, that being said, how did they handle all of these unfinished plot threads? Well, they handled it very poorly. Ralph's storyline is ended off-screen when he gets burned beyond belief trying to find evidence to free Sue. They get everyone out of the Mirrorverse because Eva just lets them go? Great. They stop Eva by talking to her and holding her hands. Jesus Christ. They get Barry's speed back by using the spark in Iris from Season 4 when she became a speedster. Okay, fine. By that logic then, why didn't they just use Velocity X to create a lightning charge? It connected to the original Speed Force, did it not? Or, why not use Barry's Speed Force connection in the first place? Why didn't he generate a lightning bolt or something to act as a power source? Ugh. They claim that Iris used her love for Barry to help bring the Speed Force back. So, make of that what you will. Oh, and the cliffhanger where Earth-1 Wells comes back to life, he just kind of shows up in the present day. He has time travel powers now, so he just time travels into Star Labs. They introduce this new version of Wells just to have him leave. He appears in 2 episodes total. Eva's plan in this episode makes her into a clone of Bloodwork. They tried to shove in a plot twist where the Eva that we have been seeing since episode 11 is actually a mirror clone, and the real Eva died. Defoe Barry ended up exposing this to the world, which kind of made her go crazy, and then she decided that she was going to make the real world her world. So she ended up kidnapping a bunch of people and turning them into mirror clones. It's a change in motivation, but it's the same goal. Replace all the humans on Earth with mirror clones. Ramsey's plan was to cure all the humans in the world by turning them all into blood zombies. Same thing. Then, in the finale, her motivations change again so she could justify her actions, and it actually becomes the same plan. She says that having the world run by mirror clones would improve the world and make everything better. So, her plan is now to replace the world with mirror clones that would improve the world. Ramsey wanted to replace the world with blood zombies that would never die and cure the world. How did they write the same plan twice? Anyways, Eva decides to go back to the Mirrorverse, and she releases everyone she captured. Okay then. We end on the reveal that when rebooting the Speed Force, Team Flash created 3 other forces along with it. Now, other than this episode, there are still some problems with the story. In episode 21, Barry has a perfect opportunity to stop Eva, and he just doesn't. Right here, when he's collecting the particles, he's moving so fast that she is standing still. He could have collected the particles and then stopped her. Later in the episode, he talks about needing a tactical advantage to stop her, but it's so easy. Just super speed grab her. Also, in episode 14, the Speed Force dies. From that point onwards, Barry is running on borrowed speed, considering that he will eventually run out. However, the definition of running out is used very loosely, considering he is running out of speed for 6 episodes. In episode 16, he struggles to make it back to a building to try and save Joe. Earlier in the episode, Barry wasn't fast enough to stop a bullet from hitting Joe. Then, 2 episodes later, Godspeed shows up and Barry is able to run around the city for a while, and he manages to have some of his speed stolen twice in that episode. If he had so little speed in episode 16, how does he have so much in episode 18? Overall, this arc was pretty good, albeit there was a terrible ending. I think that these 2 story arcs in Season 6 are the best the show has been since Season 1, and Season 6 in general is my favorite season. That being said, let's go into the next story arc. This arc is so bad that it rivals Season 5 for being the worst season. Hell, I'd go as far as saying that it is the worst storyline the show has ever had. Let me break it down. It follows the end of Reflections and Lies, where the team created 3 new forces along with the Speed Force being revived. Alright, cool, that has potential. It then takes any interesting ideas and throws them straight out the window for the dumbest, most mind-numbingly bad plot that has ever been vomited onto a television screen. They decided to take the pain level of Season 5 and dial it up to a fucking million. Here's the story. At first, the team has to deal with Abracadabra, who's back to cause chaos because he wants to bring back his wife and kid from the pre-crisis timeline. Fine. The episode itself is mediocre. Now, considering the fact that Barry just spent 8 episodes learning that he should rely on his brain and speed in order to solve problems, Barry decides to throw all of that knowledge out the window and solve every problem by talking to the bad guys. He talks down Abracadabra, but then, a giant-ass, a ugly Hulk monster attacks them. It kills Kadabra, and then Barry tries to throw a lightning bolt at it, but it just absorbs the lightning bolt and catches Barry as he runs away. At super speed. Okay then. This first monster thing is the Strength Force, one of the 3 that we're going to meet. In the next episode, we meet Psych, or the Sage Force. In the first confrontation, Barry puts the metacuffs on him instantly. Awesome. Good job, Barry. But then Psych just breaks out. Okay. Barry gets whammied and he sees his greatest fears. Thawne and Savitar. Cool. He then gets stabbed by Savitar. He ends up waking up on the street, bleeding from the emblem of his suit. What? The explanation they give is that Barry's brain tricked his body into thinking it got stabbed, so his body just created a stab wound. Or a wound that was capable of bleeding? What? They have another fight where Barry decides to throw a lightning bolt. Dude, he's standing right there. Just go and cuff him again. Or bring him to the CCPD. But no, Barry tosses a lightning bolt and Psych catches it. Tell me, how can he move fast enough for that? In episode 6, we meet the Still Force, yada yada backstory that nobody cares about. Cisco has this god-awful moment where he names all of the forces.
The opposite of the Speed Force, he's the Still Force, which I guess would make Fuerza the Strength Force, and that would make Psych the Sage Force.
I understand that they have these names in the comics and that they need the names here, but I think naming them all at once is, I don't know, it's cringe. Like, there are better ways to name the forces than having Cisco come up with all of them on the spot. This feels like a Suicide Squad moment.
So that's it? What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
These moments are practically the same. I feel like it could have been more organic if there was more time in the arc, or if they had just spent more time focusing on one of the forces before the others were introduced. Imagine this. Fuerza attacks first, and at a crime scene, Barry is able to find some evidence of a possible suspect. When handling the evidence, it has a reaction when he touches it. He brings it to Star Labs, and they run a test to see why it reacted to Barry. They find out that it has similar properties to the Speed Force. Then, when they actually have their first interaction with Fuerza, Cisco can have his moment of saying, "So what, is there a Strength Force now?" or something like that. Anyways, episodes 7 and 8 deviate from the Force's plot, while Frost gets arrested and goes on trial. I don't have much to say, to be honest. The Frost stuff wasn't all that interesting, and the Force stuff was actually the highlight of the episode, surprisingly. In episode 7, Barry gets a speed boost from the Speed Force, and it causes his speed to spaz out, which ends up destroying some evidence that can prove Frost's innocence. I actually like the setup for this. In Psych's episode, the Speed Force kinda just shows up, it materializes in the air and falls into Star Labs, and then it goes into a coma. At the end of the episode, Barry gets a random psychic attack that goes unexplained for the rest of ever, and when he goes into a stasis pod to heal, the Speed Force wakes up. In the next episode, Iris and the Speed Force bond, and Iris invites the Speed Force to stay in their guest room. She doesn't talk to Barry about this, she just goes right ahead and invites the Speed Force in. Barry is very clearly hesitant about it, but he doesn't say no. Now, in episode 7, the Speed Force is hanging around Barry, and Barry doesn't want it there, and it gets to a point where Barry yells at the Speed Force for getting in the way. I really like it, because for once, the show actually shows that Barry doesn't want the Speed Force around without having to explicitly say it.
No, look, I can feel all of the anger inside you.
Shut the fuck up. I haven't mentioned her in a while, but remember Cecile and her powers? In Season 7, her powers have turned into the script's way of telling people how characters feel. If someone is feeling anything that isn't neutral, Cecile will show up in a scene and be like, "I'm sensing a whole lot of blank coming from you right now, what's wrong?" It's terrible writing, but at least this time, they let Barry show his emotions instead of spelling it out when it was already obvious. Anyways, in episode 8, Frost gets arrested, and Barry meets Alexa, or, as we know her, the giant-ass Hulk monster. This is her human form, when she isn't a big-ass monster. Anyways, Barry and the Speed Force are able to convince her to go to Star Labs to test her, and when they do, the Speed Force just straight up murders her. That's right, folks, the villain of the story is the Speed Force. Barry has to fight the source of his fucking powers. Great. In episode 9, Barry decides that the best course of action is to go back in time and stop the forces from being created. Iris thinks that the best course of action is to talk to the Speed Force and reason with it. She says that uncreating the forces is crossing a line. How? How does this cross a line? All he would be doing is making sure that 3 innocent people don't get killed, because the Speed Force went crazy. Her argument is that the Speed Force is a person and it can be reasoned with, but Barry says that it isn't a person and it never was. Barry is out here trying to make sure that innocent lives are being protected, and Iris is out bitching about the Speed Force having a life. Barry then has a conversation with the Still Force, who says that he doesn't want to be fixed, and he destroys part of the device they were going to use. Cisco ends up agreeing that they shouldn't destroy the forces, and so Barry talks to Joe. Joe then gives the worst analogy of the show, and he single-handedly takes this storyline from being bad to being garbage. He tells Barry that he shouldn't judge the forces for who they are, but who they can be, and that he should want the best for his kids. Joe said that the forces are Barry and Iris's children. The worst part is that, from this moment onwards, the show treats this as if it's a good idea. All of the forces refer to Barry and Iris as Mom and Dad.
Bashir, you don't have to fight us.
Yes, I do, Dad.
You and I have a common enemy. Our father, Barry Allen, rejected me.
The Speed Force looks like Nora Allen, Barry's mom, and she refers to him as her father. I can't even begin to describe how fucking uncomfortable this shit is. Why would they do that? Anyways, Barry goes back in time with timeless wells, and they collect the Force particles. But then, surprisingly, the show decides to use its budget wisely and creates a fucking beautiful scene. I have this as my computer background. Barry decides to let the Forces be created and fix things in a different way. Cool. Although I don't think this episode is terrible, I do think that it was pointless. Barry spends the entire episode wanting to uncreate the Forces, and then at the last minute, he decides not to, even though the plan would have worked. It was 40 minutes of wasted storytelling that could have been used to develop the characters and actually work towards making the plot interesting. Episode 10 is actually decent, although it's clowned on for its fight scenes. Psyche magically grows these two tentacle things. It's weird. Also, I forgot to mention, episode 9 ended in the dumbest fucking way ever. Barry and Iris reconcile after their argument, and when they do, the Strength Force brings Alexa back to life. What? It would have been a better explanation if they said that when Barry let the Forces get created, it sparked the Strength Force in her body and woke her up. Simple! It shows the three Forces being hit with lightning and being erased. So, when Barry releases the particles and allows their birth, it causes the Forces to surge back into the host bodies, and then the Strength Force revives Alexa. Anyways, Barry tries to train Alexa, but he pushes her too far and she accidentally hurts Cisco. But by the end of the episode, she figures out how to work with Forza. They also give Psyche a pep talk and he agrees to join Team Flash. But the Speed Force talks to Dion and gets him to help her. Barry and Iris bring Alexa and Psyche to Star Labs. When Nora and Dion teleport in, freeze time, and the Speed Force kills Alexa, Psyche, and Iris. Honestly, this episode wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking. The funny thing is, though, when I watched the episode, I saw the ending and I was actually excited. I genuinely thought that the writers were going to try something different, and I hoped that they would commit to killing the Forces, and possibly even Iris. I don't know why I was so naive, though, because obviously they can't kill off the main character Iris. If she isn't there, who else is going to be right all the time? Anyways, my peaceful bliss was cut short when the next episode immediately starts by revealing the fake-out deaths. Psyche just happened to learn a new ability right then and there, and it just happened to be the perfect ability that they needed. Psyche made a lifelike illusion, so everyone saw Iris, Alexa, and Psyche die, but in reality, they moved out of the way. Okay. Anyways, Barry sends Alexa, Iris, and Psyche into the dead Speed Force from Season 6. He then gets pulled back into the main timeline and talks to the Speed Force, blah blah blah. Cecile gets hit with a lightning bolt because there's a storm going on. Coolio. Barry talks to Dion, but he wants to kill the Speed Force. Okay. Barry has a heart-to-heart with the Speed Force, and oh boy, the writing in this scene is atrocious. Barry gives her the whole,
Nora, you and the other Forces were created by something just as powerful as all this. The love that Iris and I have for each other.
Spiel, but it doesn't work. The Speed Force then reveals that the storm is being caused by the other forces. The earthquakes? That's a show of strength. And the lightning that hits Cecile? Apparently that's Sage. And then there's a random ass fucking plane that just flies over their heads, which is apparently the Still Force. Okay, that's fine. I don't care that the other forces are creating the storm, but I do care about the awful fucking dialogue. It's better if you hear it for yourself, so I will interject to explain how bad it is.
You still don't understand. You feel that? That wasn't me. It never has been. That was a show of strength, Barry.
Okay, pause here. The Speed Force explains that the earthquakes are caused by the Strength Force, and she calls them a show of strength. Okay, sure. But then, immediately after saying that it's a show of strength, she says,
Just like what happened to Cecile earlier.
Sage.
the Speed Force is saying that what happened to Cecile earlier was a show of strength. But then Barry says that it was the Sage Force? Okay then, whatever. Anyways, all of the forces team up and they fight the Speed Force inside of the Speed Force, and they kinda win. And then Dion shows it a life where it's alone. that then makes it realize that it was wrong and shouldn't have been trying to kill the other forces. So it agrees to team up and help Barry stop a tornado that's going to destroy the entire world. I wish I was joking, but that's the actual plot of the episode. Anyways, after all of this, the Force's characters go into the Speed Force area thing, and they give Barry a permanent speed boost. The episode and story arc ends with Iris and Barry deciding that they want to have a family. The end, and praise the Lord, it's finally over. After God Complex was finished, the season then has 3 episodes that are dedicated to side characters. Episode 12 is dedicated to Cisco because he decided to leave the show. This was actually a fun episode, and I have no complaints about it. There's a part where Barry and Cisco get whammied by a new version of Rainbow Raider, and then Barry runs into Star Labs with this amazing face. It's great. Episode 13 was dedicated to Cecile, and episode 14 was dedicated to Allegra. I did not watch either of those episodes. I've seen clips, and they make me never want to watch the episodes. Episode 13 gave Cecile a backstory that was never ever hinted at. My guess is that they needed a reason to have an episode about Cecile, so they wrote her a backstory for this episode and this episode alone. I've seen every other episode other than these 2, and Cecile's backstory is never brought up again other than in this episode. Unless it was in episode 14, but even then, this episode is so useless. In Allegra's episode, she ends up redeeming her cousin who was a black hole agent. Not really much to say here either. Okay, that being said, let's get on to the next storyline. This arc continues the bad streak, but it isn't as bad as God Complex. Due to the 3 interlude episodes between the 2 arcs, there were 4 episodes left in the season to tell this story. That being said, let's get into it. It starts with Barry having a vision from... No, God, please, no, not Nora! Anyways, this dream convinces Barry that Iris is pregnant, so throughout the episode, Barry is trying to put together a pregnancy test, but he keeps on getting interrupted. Meanwhile, 2 Godspeed clones attack the city. When Barry and Chester are able to track one of them, Barry ends up running into a trap, getting ambushed by another 5 clones. Barry ends up turning on the Babel protocols and locking up Star Labs, but the Godspeeds get in, and Barry, Frost, and Chillblaine have to fight them. If you're wondering who Chillblaine is, he's the guy who tried to frame Frost. He isn't too important yet, so this is the only time I'm going to mention him. Anyways, there's an actual fight, and Barry doesn't try to talk to the clones at all. It's amazing. The speedster fight is actually really good. This episode itself was mediocre, but that fight was great. Anyways, Barry leads all of the Godspeeds out of Star Labs, but they're faster than him. Of course they are. They end up surrounding him, and they're about to steal his speed, when all of a sudden, 6 more clones show up and attack the other ones. There's a brawl, and then all 12 of them disappear. They say that it's a Godspeed civil war, but the civil war only really matters for 1 more episode. Essentially, they end up capturing one of the Godspeed clones, and it tells them everything. The ones that first showed up are fighting to steal Barry's speed and give it to August Hart, the original Godspeed. The other 6 who saved Barry are there to fight for their freedom. If August Hart gets that speed, he will kill all of the clones, so they want to kill August first. Barry doesn't want to kill anyone, so he doesn't side with new Godspeeds. Then, when fighting some Godspeed clones in the city, the team meets the real August Hart, but he has amnesia and doesn't remember anything. At the end of the episode, Nora returns. She comes back with a new sibling, Bart, or Impulse. We start the next episode with a flashback, or flash forward, to 2049, when Nora and Bart are trying to stop Godspeed. This is where we get our first look at the real main villain of the arc, the real Godspeed. Let's take a look.
Infinite velocity will soon be mine. And once my ascension is complete, all will bow before the might of Godspeed!
Oh. Keep in mind, this is the second last episode of the storyline, and we are only just getting introduced to the real villain. And worst of all, it's a 2-second clip. Godspeed is supposed to be the main villain of the story, yet we have seen him get stopped 3 times throughout the show's history. Once in episode 18 of season 5 when Nora stopped him, and twice at the start of this episode. Nora catches him and knocks him out, and then Bart phases through him. The only reason he gets away is because Nora and Bart are idiots and they argue instead of taking Godspeed to Iron Heights. Like father, like kids. I hate Nora. Anyways, Godspeed ends up time traveling, and Nora and Bart follow him back, which lands them in our present day. Barry lets Nora and Bart stay in the past, and he takes them out on patrol, where all the fighting Godspeeds end up turning their attention towards Bart. The dialogue is atrocious. Kill the adversary is repeated so many times. It's terrible.
Kill the adversary! Strike him down! Kill the adversary!
Barry wants to know why the Godspeeds all targeted Bart, and Bart explains that Godspeed is his Thawne, his arch nemesis. Instead of trying to understand, Barry then yells at him for not knowing what Thawne's name means. Barry, you fucking moron. Also, we learn that Godspeed killed Jay Garrick because he was really close to Bart, but in the opening of the episode, Bart is fooling around and acting like Godspeed hasn't done anything to him. If Godspeed did kill Jay, and they have a real rivalry, Bart's first priority should be to make sure August gets put in jail. But no, he argues with Nora and lets him get away. Anyways, Iris gets reintroduced to the story after being absent for a couple of episodes. She was infected with a time sickness that makes her phase in and out of timelines. She gets help from Dion and is able to go back to the present day safely. Anyways, Iris and Barry reunite and Iris meets Nora and Bart, and they decide to bench Bart. Fine. Bart ends up running into a trap and getting his speed drained, and Barry and Nora just stand there and watch for a while. Poor Bart. Barry ends up saving him and Jay, and they go back to Star Labs. They learn that August Hart wants organic speed, and once he gets it, he will get rid of all the clones. Okay, let's break this down. Originally, Barry didn't want to help the clones get August Hart, because he didn't want anyone to die. But he ends up giving August organic speed, which results in him killing all of the clones. Before they give him organic speed, they have a fight with a bunch of Godspeed clones. They recruit Jay and the Speed Force onto their team to fight the Godspeeds. The Speed Force ends up boosting everyone's speed, which includes the spark of Speed Force energy inside of Iris, which makes her a speedster for the episode. They go into battle and have a scene that shows off each of their abilities. Jay becomes Captain America, despite there being an established power with the helmet. Could they not have reused the sonic blast created by punching the helmet? The Speed Force is able to just sap the speed from a bunch of the clones. Bro, if you're that overpowered, why not do it to all of them? Anyways, the clones start siphoning speed from the Speed Force. I'm curious, if they can absorb Speed Force energy, how do they not have organic speed? Barry ends up giving August organic speed by using his Speed Force energy to activate the Velocity 9 in his system. If that is able to give August real speed, how does the clones absorbing organic speed not give them a Speed Force connection? Anyways, Barry gives August the organic speed, and he turns evil. So, now that August is Godspeed, we finally have our first ever interaction between Barry and August, with less than 20 minutes left in the episode. Barry tells Bart and Nora to stay at Star Labs, and he goes out to fight Hart. Hart kills the clones and absorbs their speed, making him a lot faster than Barry. But don't worry, Barry decided that the best way to stop Godspeed is to get Thawne to help him. What? The Speed Force, taps into the negative Speed Force and brings Thawne back to life, I guess? They didn't really explain it. Also, remember when the Speed Force did this? Why don't you get her to take August's speed? Why do you need Thawne? Whatever. They team up to fight Godspeed, and then this happens. Godspeed summons a lightning saber. After this, Barry and Thawne both pull out their own lightsabers, and they have a sword fight. The Flash became Star Wars. They were able to do a good speedster battle in episode 15. So what the hell happened? Why can't they just do another speedster battle? The fact is, they use their speed once, and all they do is run up a set of stairs and then run back down. Welcome to The Flash, a show where speedsters will do anything except for using their speed properly. Anyways, Thawne ends up stabbing Godspeed, and Barry is shocked and is like, "You could have killed him!" Barry, Thawne is fucking evil. Did you not expect this? Barry then lets Thawne go. Barry, you are so fucking dumb. Whatever. That's the end of the arc. We only have one more season left to go. Let's get it over with. Coming off the heels of Season 7, Season 8 has 3 story arcs, and they are all huge improvements from Season 7. But that's not saying much, because it isn't exactly hard to write something that is better than Season 7. So, just because Season 8 is better, doesn't mean it's good. Armageddon was the first arc of Season 8, and it acts as a mini sort of crossover event between some of the shows in the DC TV universe. Although it is kind of a crossover, it only takes place on The Flash, so it's just a normal story arc with guest appearances from different superheroes. It starts with a flash forward to 2031. Someone named Despero is witnessing an Armageddon, and he time travels back to present day to stop it. In the present day, Barry has leveled up and is able to do some pretty dope things with his speed. And don't worry, if you ever forget how fast Barry is, the show will remind you because they will not shut up about people leveling up.
Wow, you have seriously leveled up.
Looks like the Royal Flush Gang just leveled up too.
They just leveled up.
Anyways, this episode is dedicated to stopping the Royal Flush Gang. The episode makes it so that Barry doesn't get a chance to interact with them, because if he did, the episode would be over a lot quicker. It leads to this awesome scene where Barry finally finds them, and he just clowns on them. He gets them to hit each other and beats them all. It was amazing, and I wish that they did this more. At the end of the episode, Despero shows up and tells Barry that he is the one who causes Armageddon, and that he needs to die in order to prevent it. Barry decides that he's going to prove to Despero that he is innocent, and that he won't destroy the world. Despero gives Barry 7 days to prove his innocence, but then goes back on that deal almost immediately. Essentially, Despero tells Barry that he's about to go insane, and then everything goes wrong. Barry gets fired from the CCPD, Star Labs gets shut down, he has to destroy Gideon, and he finds out about a meta who controls people's minds. He tries to stop her, but because he's a moron, he stops to talk and gets mind controlled. He ends up attacking his team because of this, and they start to lose trust in him, but he convinces them that he was mind controlled. They work together to find the meta, and Barry stops to talk again, but he ends up generating a lightning explosion by vibrating his cells, and he stops her. Once he thinks that everything's fine, he finds out that Joe died 6 months ago. This sends him into a spiral, and then he sees that there's a news report of the Flash attacking civilians on the street. Despero uses this as enough proof that Barry is going insane, and he goes to kill him, but Team Flash protects him, and Barry calls in Black Lightning to put the Injustice Protocols in place. Essentially, the Injustice Protocols are precautions in case a hero were to go rogue. The protocols are good in theory, but bad in practice. Basically, in the episode, it's explained that Barry's Injustice Protocol is that he would have Black Lightning overload his cells with energy, and it would sever his connection to the Speed Force. In order to do that, Barry would have to build a set of conduits. You see, in an actual situation where Barry goes rogue, why would you make a system where Barry, the one that went rogue, has to make the device capable of stopping him? That's not a good plan. Anyways, Barry makes the device, and Black Lightning drains him of most of his speed. Barry then tries to get Jefferson to drain the rest, but he doesn't want to, and Barry ends up attacking Jefferson because he refuses to take his speed. The fight ends when Barry accidentally destroys the mural made for Oliver, and Barry realizes that he was being a complete moron. Anyways, Despero finds him, but Dion is able to save Barry and send him to the future to see the Armageddon for himself, and he finds out that Thawne is behind everything. Turns out, he went back in time and changed the timeline. First, he framed Barry to get him fired. Then, he screwed with some tech at Star Labs to get it shut down. And then, he killed Joe. He also used Barry's face to go back in time and attack the city. All of this to make Barry seem insane. Alright, the plan is straightforward so far. Then, Thawne decided that in order to be faster than Barry, he needed to become the Flash. So he went back to the particle accelerator and made sure that he was the one who got struck by lightning. He became the Flash, and he got with Iris. He made sure that Barry became the Reverse Flash. How did he make Barry the villain? I don't know. It's never actually explained. But guess what? It doesn't matter, because Thawne decided that he would go back in time again and kill Barry as a child. Thawne's plan goes from straightforward to convoluted in 2 seconds. He changes the timeline so many times that it's confusing to follow, especially considering the fact that killing Barry as a child erases the perfect world he has where Barry is the Reverse Flash. Thawne's plan in the story arc feels like multiple story arcs put together. Individually, each story arc actually has some really interesting potential, but when they put it together this way, it ends up being really dumb. Anyways, Barry's getting erased from the timeline, so he has to race against the clock to fix the timeline before he gets erased. He ends up using a device called the Particle Eradication Distributor. Coupled with the time stone that Damien Dark has, Barry will be able to entirely reset the timeline when he enters it. In order to do this, however, Barry needs to run at such a high speed that he will destroy the world. Resetting the timeline would cause Armageddon. Barry ends up going along with the plan, causing this Armageddon, but he is able to outrun Thawne and reset the timeline. Considering that Barry is running on limited speed, it's surprising that Thawne isn't able to catch him, although it is consistent that in any timeline, the Flash isn't able to catch the person he's chasing. In the end, Thawne travels back in time to ask for Team Flash's help. Thawne is now getting erased from the timeline, and he wants the team to find a way to save his life. Most of the team actually thinks that they should let Thawne die, but fucking Joe shows up and yells at Barry and Iris, saying that they should save everyone. In the end, Barry ends up fighting Despero because he wants to kill Thawne, but Barry fights to save Thawne. Despero decides that in order to save the world, he's gonna destroy Central City. Chester ends up converting the PED into boots, so Barry uses the tech to take control of Despero's flame and use it against him. After that, Barry runs back to Star Labs and severs Thawne's connection to the negative Speed Force, saving his life. Thawne goes to prison, and Armageddon comes to an end. Like I said earlier, there was a lot of potential with this storyline, and there is a lot of good that comes with it. Barry fighting the Royal Flush Gang was an amazing scene. Barry's new ability when fighting Zotar in episode 2, awesome. I actually think that if Thawne's plan wasn't a double-layered plan smushed together, either of the plans would have made for a really interesting plot. The problems arise when you look at how they went about it. Thawne's double plan ends up backfiring on him because he changed the timeline so many times. If he wants to make Barry seem crazy, fine, go for it. I really like that plot idea, but stick with it. After he went through the trouble of setting all of that up, he just ran back again and made himself the Flash. Again, that's a great concept. A role reversal is awesome, but if he's gonna set up a timeline where Barry is his arch nemesis, why would he then erase Barry from the timeline? He is completely ruining his own perfect timeline. Also, considering that Season 7 ended with Bart and Nora coming back from 2049, I'm surprised that nobody on Team Flash realized that there was some time travel shenanigans going on. If Nora and Bart are alive and well in 2049, how is there an Armageddon in 2031? In episode 4, when Thawne exposition dumps his entire story to Barry, this exchange happens.
What the hell did you do?
Nothing you haven't done before.
You created a flashpoint.
Wrong. I created a reverse flashpoint.
What's the difference? The show refers to a flashpoint as any big change to the timeline. So, Barry saving his mom is a flashpoint. Nora punching the satellite in Season 4 is a flashpoint. Technically, by Thawne's definition, a reverse flashpoint is the same thing. He changed the timeline to make it the way he wants. He created a flashpoint. There is no reason to call it a reverse flashpoint because the two terms are one and the same. Also, the fact that Armageddon happens in Thawne's timeline means that from the get-go, Despero should be after Thawne. If Thawne was the Flash, and Armageddon was caused by the Flash, then why did Despero go back to a timeline where Barry is the Flash? How did everything line up perfectly to frame Barry, when Armageddon was a completely different timeline? In order for all of this to work, Despero would have to be present in Thawne's Flashpoint in order to see Armageddon, then travel back in time to the timeline where Thawne made Barry look crazy. For any of this to make any sense, Barry would become the Flash, go crazy, attack the city, and then become the Reverse Flash. But this also means that in order for Thawne to be present as the Flash, Barry would never become the Flash. Do you see why this doesn't work? There is no possible way for this time travel plot to work properly because these events don't coexist. There isn't a linear path towards Armageddon. It only happens when like 4 separate timelines collide. You have the normal timeline, which would be the progression from when Season 7 ends. Then there's the one where Thawne frames Barry, which is a similar but different timeline. Then there's Thawne's Flashpoint, which is entirely different from both of the other timelines. And finally, there's the one where Thawne kills Barry as a child. Barry comes from the original timeline and ends up being put into the framed timeline because of Thawne's manipulation, and then he ends up in the Flashpoint timeline when he tries to time travel. When you put it all together, the timeline gets completely fucked up, and it gets really confusing. This 4-way time fuck is the only way that it can work properly, and when you have a time travel story, it's your job to make sure that the timeline actually works. I honestly think that this could have been a much better story if it centered around Thawne changing one event, and Barry has to figure it out and fix it. In the end, this storyline may have had some interesting ideas, but it's completely butchered by the fact that none of it should be able to happen. There are 2 episodes between Armageddon and the next storyline. These episodes are mid. They aren't great, but they aren't bad. Episode 6 follows Bart and Nora. Ew. They end up on a time travel adventure because of some ripple effect in the timeline. It isn't entirely clear what caused it, but they're able to fix things. Episode 7 is a lockdown episode where a villain named Goldface breaks into the CCPD precinct to steal bullets, with a metahuman cure. Of course, that didn't happen, but it was entertaining nonetheless. Now, let's get on to the second last storyline. Just like Armageddon, this storyline had a lot of potential, but it didn't live up to what it could have been. The storyline starts with an episode that is actually really good. Episode 8 is where Barry tries to prove the innocence of a fire meta who is being wrongfully accused of 2 murders. This episode is top-notch and really emotional. It deals a lot with Barry's grief towards his dad's death, a topic that isn't touched upon much. The last time we saw anything about that was during the Season 2 finale. This episode was a heartfelt one, and it was perfect. I love it. Anyways, the setup for this storyline is that there's a fire going around and killing people. At first, the team has no idea what's causing the fires. A witness puts it on the meta that Barry tries to defend, but they soon learn that the burn marks don't match the metas, so they're able to clear his name. In episode 9, they learn that the fire acts on its own. It's a black flame that can appear and disappear at will. They collect a sample of the fire, even though the sample just appears out of thin air for no reason. Like, Barry arrives at the crime scene as the Flash, and the fire completely puts itself out. Then, Barry and Chester go to analyze the crime scene, and all of a sudden, there's a little bit of the fire left? Okay then. They bring it to Star Labs, and it ends up attacking Chester. Through this, they learn that the fire targets people who are grieving. In episode 9, Chester was randomly feeling grief for his father's death, so the flame was able to target that grief. Chester ended up standing up against a hallucination of his dad because the fire was trying to manipulate him. However, in episode 10, the fire's motivation changes. It goes from a grief-driven flame to one that needs to be fueled by cold fusion, so it starts to target Frost. Frost decides that she wants to use her powers as bait to catch the flame, so they try, but it doesn't work. Then, at the episode, we find out that the flames are actually Ronnie, or at least they claim to be. Other than this revelation, the entirety of episodes 9 and 10 are useless. They kill the pacing of the story because the grief reveal and cold fusion things are drawn out during each episode. The plot of episode 9 happens based on Chester randomly grieving his dad, and the fact that a sample of the fire randomly shows up at the crime scene, despite the fire being put out earlier. And also, if you want to reveal that it's a grief-based flame, remember that Barry was just grieving his dad? Hello? Episode 10 has two sequences where Frost and the team try to capture the fire, but neither of them work. It's drawn out over the episode, only for nothing to come of it. As much as the setup in episode 8 was really good, having a disappearing flame as a villain isn't very interesting. Anyways, in episode 11, Caitlin wants to work to create a new body for Ronnie to bring him back to life. Barry is against the idea because he thinks the fire is manipulating her to get what it wants. Cecile's powers make her think that if the flame is Ronnie, he just wants to be put out of his misery. So, Barry ends up trying to capture and extinguish the flames, but Caitlin and Frost destroy the prison and give the flames a body. At first, it seems to be Ronnie, but then it's revealed that it actually isn't Ronnie, and it's a villain named Deathstorm. In the next episode, Deathstorm prepares Caitlin because he wants her to be his wife. Essentially, Deathstorm was created when Ronnie died in the Singularity. The Firestorm fusion energy ended up merging Ronnie with the Singularity, which created a new entity. That entity was Deathstorm. But, since the Singularity was a vortex, it obviously didn't have a body, which is why it was only able to appear as the Black Flame. Now that Caitlin has given him a body, he's a lot more powerful, and since Ronnie is still technically a part of Deathstorm, he wants Caitlin as his bride. At least, that's my understanding of it. There's a really cool sequence where Barry chases Deathstorm through the sky by using his lightning bolts as platforms to run on. I really like this idea. It's cool. Okay, in episode 13, they create a device that turns Frost into someone that can absorb Deathstorm and his powers, which effectively stops him. However, when she does this, it's too much power for her to handle, and she ends up dying. The stupid thing is, during this episode, Deathstorm targets all of Team Flash and exploits their grief. Episode 8 was dedicated to Barry's grief about his father. So tell me, when Deathstorm targets Barry, why did he choose his mother? It would have been a perfect opportunity to have Barry see his father. Barry has dealt with his mother's death, time and time again. It would have been so much more impactful if they continued with the idea they had started in episode 8. Anyways, I don't actually have much else to say about this. I really like the CGI they had for Deathstorm, cause he consistently looked really cool. I like that they brought back Ronnie. In episode 11, there were flashbacks to when Ronnie and Caitlin first met and fell in love. It really gave me season 1 vibes, and I honestly really miss Ronnie. He was a great addition to the cast, and it sucks that he was killed off so early. Also, I liked this arc as an end for Frost. I never liked her character that much, but I like the fact that she was able to go out with a sacrifice, although it's worth mentioning that I think Hellfrost was a really stupid idea. Also, when Caitlin and Barry were trying to save Frost, Caitlin said,
Okay, I'm gonna inject her with cold fusion. That'll bring Frost back.
What? I don't know if I'm being stupid, but I'm pretty sure that cold fusion isn't something you can inject into someone's bloodstream. Anyways, this arc is okay, but the pacing is kind of slow, and I do think that episodes 9 and 10 could be completely removed, and the storyline would still make sense. They discover that the fire is cold fusion in episode 8, so they could just use that as the basis to make the fusion trap. You don't need 2 full episodes to deal with the flame when Deathstorm is an actual conscious being, and a much more interesting threat. My only other complaint is that I would have liked to see Barry have an actual fight with Deathstorm. The closest thing we got was Barry tossing a single lightning bolt at him, and then getting fucking clapped. Literally. Anyways, moving on, we have one more interlude and one more storyline. So, the first episode, episode 14, is about everyone's grief about Frost's death. There's a villain named Blockbuster. He attacks the city early on in the episode, and Team Flash absolutely suck at defeating him. He says that Team Flash are the worst heroes ever, and he couldn't be more right. At the end of the episode, Iris ends up disappearing because of her time sickness, so in episode 15, Barry goes into the Still Force to find her. He ends up being betrayed by Dion, and he takes control of the Still Force to escape. Finally, in episode 16, Barry gets hit with a blast that makes him rapidly age, so he ends up getting slower and he has to stop the villain before he turns everyone in Central City into very old people. These episodes weren't bad per se, but they also weren't that great. I ended up skipping episode 14 because it was really slow. I tried to watch it with my parents, but we ended up skipping it. And so I told them that Iris disappeared at the end. As soon as I said that, my mom said, "Oh, thank God," which is really funny to me. Episode 15 brought Nora back, and you already know I hate her, so not much to say. Episode 16 was fine. I saw reviews that said it was a great episode, and that it felt like a Season 1 episode, but it didn't really feel like that for me. It wasn't a bad episode, but it didn't capture the same feelings as something like Episode 8, or Season 6 Episode 7, or Season 6 Episode 21. Anyways, let's move on to the last storyline that has been released so far. This storyline starts with an episode that is centered around Allegra. Her plotline doesn't factor into the story at all, however, because our first introduction to the main plot of these 4 episodes is through the subplot of what is otherwise a filler episode. Essentially, Barry runs into a lab to put out a fire, but he discovers that the fire was already put out. The scientists at the lab thank him for putting out the fire, which confuses him considering the fact that he wasn't there. So he realizes that there's a new speedster in town, and he worries that it's Thawne, so he runs to Lian Yu to check on him in prison. The episode has these great moments between Barry and Thawne. Barry wants Thawne to give him insight into who the new speedster is, and what they could be doing, and Thawne doesn't want to. The answer is so obvious to Thawne, and he says this when talking to Barry.
Can you really not see how obvious his answer is? Are you stupid?
Yes, Thawne. He's the epitome of brain damage. Anyways, Barry manipulates Thawne into angrily giving him the answer, and then Barry leaves. He meets the new speedster when she is returning some of the tech that she stole. There's a small chase where Barry effortlessly outmatches her, and it's great to see Barry being the fastest man alive and enjoying it. Anyways, Barry finds out the speedster is Mina Dawan, and he agrees to train her. He learns a few things while training her. 1. She isn't a real speedster. Her speed is temporary and is being generated by a machine. 2. Eobard Thawne built the machine when he created his negative speed force. 3. There are 2 versions of Thawne running around in 2022. 4. The second Thawne built the machine in 2022. And, last but not least, the machine is generating the negative speed force. All of this combined makes Barry think that Thawne is behind all this, and the version of Thawne that is free and working with Mina is trying to manipulate her. His consistent accusations causes Mina to get angry and lose control over the negative speed force, which turns her into the negative Flash. Barry ends up defeating her and getting her back to normal, and Barry realizes that the Thawne who built the machine in 2022 is actually a good guy. I don't have a problem with making a good guy Thawne, but I was honestly really excited because I thought that this was going to be a Thawne origin story, and then it wasn't. There was this really good moment where Barry first meets the good Thawne, and you can immediately see that Barry is angry, caught off guard, and just completely apprehensive towards Thawne. And Thawne says that he has amnesia, and Barry's just like, sure. So I was really invested in their relationship, but then he just turned out to be a good guy? Ugh. Anyways, after that, the negative forces decide to attack. First, they kill the Thawne in Lian Yu, and then after, they try to kill the good Thawne, but Barry is able to stop them for a bit. He ends up teaching Mina how to share her speed, and he teams up with her and Thawne to stop the negative forces. Meanwhile, in 2049, Iris's time sickness ends up trapping her in the future. In the end, Barry charges up to throw a lightning bolt. The negative forces then teleport Iris in front of the lightning bolt, which means that Barry ends up killing Iris. Iris then turns into still force particles, which are transported into the good Thawne. Wells' Thawne then rips through his original face and regains his speed. Now, he taunts Barry about the deaths of Iris and his mother, and Barry starts electrocuting him. Nora and Bart then come back to the present and stop Barry from killing Thawne. They say that if Barry kills Thawne, he will be just as bad. Shut the fuck up. Barry would be doing the world a favor by killing Thawne, and I know people will argue that Barry's lack of murderous intent is what sets him apart, but Barry has killed multiple other people before. Anyways, Thawne ends up working with the negative forces, and he becomes the negative Reverse Flash, while being superpowered by all of the forces. Barry, Bart, Nora, and Mina all try to take him down, but he sends everyone but Barry back in time 1 billion years. Barry tries to fight him, but the negative forces are used to trap Barry in place. Just then, the positive forces arrive and give Barry a power boost. Thawne and Barry fight throughout the city, causing a bunch of destruction. It's another Armageddon. While this is going on, Iris is able to bring herself back to life through the Time Stone. She gets Jay Garrick to run her to Barry, and once he knows that she's alive, he decides to stop fighting Thawne. He sits down and just lets the forces take control. Thawne channels all of the power he can get, and he creates a lightning storm that destroys the city. But Barry reverses time and fixes all of it. The lightning storm ends up killing Thawne, and everything goes back to normal. This storyline was fine. I really hate Nora, and so I hate that she always ends up coming back for every finale. I also hate how she says Barry will be as bad as Thawne if he kills him. Thawne dedicated his life to making Barry's life hell. Thawne has killed countless people. He has changed the timeline so many times. Hell, he even teamed up with Nazis just because he wanted to go against Barry. Barry has done none of that. Barry has done nothing to Thawne that justifies any of his actions. If Barry kills Thawne, which he should, he would be a hero. He would be saving lives, because we know that Thawne will always find a way to screw with Barry, no matter who he hurts. Taking one life does not make Barry as bad as someone who killed numerous people. That being said, Season 8 ends with this. It was a definitive improvement over the disaster that was Season 7, but it still wasn't as good as it could be. There are so many moments that are genuinely great, but the writers can't keep it consistent. Some moments that I really like this season all revolve around Thawne. One thing the writers can do is just nail the dynamic between Barry and Thawne. It's too bad they can't write a consistent storyline with them. There are 2 scenes in episodes 17 and 18 that showcase the rivalry between Barry and Thawne really well. In episode 17, Barry questions Thawne, and leads Thawne to going on this entire rant about how he hates Barry. In the next episode, Barry meets the good version of Thawne and has a very similar reaction. I really like how it showcases the relationship between these two. With that being said though, I don't have anything else to say about this storyline. Alright, this is for a bunch of moments that didn't really fit into the storylines themselves. This will be composed of things that range from genuine criticisms to smaller nitpicks. Let's do this. Back in Season 3, Wally calls out Barry for proposing to Iris for the sole purpose of changing the future. This is something that Iris breaks up with him for. In the next episode, Iris changes her mind and Barry breaks things off with her. Then, in the show's musical episode, Barry changes his mind and proposes to Iris again. That's 3 episodes of drama that are just, I don't want to be with you. Oh wait, actually I do. Haha, sucks to suck. I don't want to be with you. Actually, yes I do. Another thing in Season 3, During the annual crossover, aliens attack Earth due to Flashpoint. Because of this, Barry puts together a team consisting of every hero across every show in the Arrowverse. After the team is put together, 2 members take Barry aside to show him a message from 2056. It's a message that a future version of Barry sent to Rip Hunter, a time traveler and also the leader of the Legends of Tomorrow at the time. I have 2 complaints about this message. 1. The dialogue sucks. Take a listen to the message.
A war is coming, Captain Hunter. And at some point you're going to be called back to Central City to fight it. So you need to know that while you and your team have been in the temporal zone, I made a choice that affected the timeline. As you know, whenever you alter the past, those changes affect the present and get compounded in the future. When you return, you will be in the new timeline I created, where everyone's past and everyone's future has been affected, including yours. When you come back, don't trust anything or anyone, not even me.
Rip Hunter and Barry Allen are both people who time travel. They both know how time travel works. You don't have to explain what happens when you change the past, especially because Barry just created Flashpoint this season. Keep in mind, both shows deal with time travel to a certain degree, so there isn't a need to explain time travel to the audience. A simple,
I made a choice that affected the timeline,
was enough. Also, the fact that this message exists means that Barry comes back after he vanishes in 2024, which means that there was no need for drama about needing to change the future. Barry could have shown the message to Nora and said, I still exist in the future, sucks to suck, go back. In Season 4, Barry faces the threat of a nuke in the season's best episode, Enter Flash Time. While being the best episode, it also has multiple points that are illogical. Near the end of the episode, Barry gets help from Jesse and Jay. They come up with the idea to use their lightning to achieve nuclear fusion and stop the reaction. While trying this, Jay isn't able to throw lightning because he's too worn out from using his speed for too long. Barry and Jesse then proceed to throw out this idea entirely. Let me rewind to episode 2. Barry's suit is hacked by the Meta of the Week, and in order to stop a self-destruct sequence, Barry throws a lightning bolt at himself. Look at this clip. We can very clearly see that Barry is much faster than his own lightning. Now, back to Flash Time. When Jay ends up being unable to throw lightning, why wouldn't Barry just generate another lightning bolt? Another thing about this episode. In the end, Barry stops the nuke by luring out the Speed Force storm. He does this by running into the Speed Force and taking out the Quark Sphere. This idea is given to him by Iris, except Iris wasn't there when Caitlin explained what the Quark Sphere was. Considering Iris didn't even want to entertain the idea of bringing Barry back, there is no reason that Iris would know anything about how they did it. Also, when DeVoe is talking to his wife about locating the bus metas, we see an incomplete list, only featuring the metas that we have met so far. Considering this is DeVoe's plan, why wouldn't the list include all of the metas? Then, in Season 5, during the 100th episode, Barry and Nora are caught in 2016 by Zoom. Zoom figures out that Nora is another speedster, and proceeds to chase Barry and Nora around the city, and eventually into the time stream. This altercation ends when a time wraith grabs Zoom. This moment completely fucks up the entire timeline of Season 2 and onwards. If Zoom is taken here, he wouldn't kill Barry's dad, Barry wouldn't create Flashpoint, Savitar wouldn't exist, the Speed Force prison wouldn't exist, DeVoe wouldn't have used the prison to create the bus metas, and therefore, Cicada wouldn't have gotten his dagger. Another thing, in Season 5, the entire dilemma of needing to destroy the dagger could be avoided if they were to just temporarily get rid of it. I wonder if they have someone on the team that could breach it to another Earth and then bring it back after defeating Cicada. Yeah. In Season 6, the writers give Iris a storyline by throwing her into a Mirrorverse and removing her from the main plot for 11 episodes. What a gripping way to make Iris relevant. During God Complex, when Barry is trying to train Alexa, she's wearing a Star Labs tank top. After she hulks out, Fuerza shows up wearing a whole different hairstyle and outfit. Did the Strength Force just generate a costume for her? In the following episode, after the tornado was stopped, all 4 forces have a complete change in personality. Dion was selfish and angry, and Alexa and Bashir were constantly bickering. After the storm, they all forgot about their characters and acted like they're forces of nature, which they are, but they had personalities. In the Godspeed initiative, the existence of the clones are never actually explained. We get an exposition dump for their motivation, but we never get to find out how they were created. In episode 17, we get to see Jay get his speed back. This happens during the time when the Godspeeds were fighting each other. Why is Jay getting his speed back now, when they rebooted the Speed Force 14 episodes ago? In episode 16, Barry is worried about Godspeed changing the future and erasing Nora from existence again. He is so worried that he runs to the future to see if she's okay. In episode 18, he proceeds to give August speed because Nora and Bart's future
starts right now.
Bart later comments on this, saying,
"Everything from now on will be different."
If you're so worried about ensuring their future, why are you changing the future? Also, Barry worries about running to the future because he doesn't want to create another flashpoint. How would running to the future change the past? My guy, where is your brain? During Armageddon, Barry fights the Royal Flush Gang. The leader of the gang is a mind reader. Barry beats them by thinking so fast they don't know what he's gonna do, although he actually beats them by using his speed efficiently. They do not have super speed. Anyways, point being, Barry thinks faster than the mind readers can keep up with. Later in the same episode, Despero is able to read Barry's mind and bypass Barry's speed mirage. During the final battle, Barry makes more speed mirages and manages to fool Despero. So which is it? Is Barry's mind too fast to read, or can Despero figure out which Barry is the real one? In the next episode, when Barry goes to the Hall of Justice, Black Lightning just shows up. What a coincidence that Barry's Injustice partner is at the hangar right when Barry needs him to be. Wow. During Death Revisited, Iris goes on a journey to help a kid named Tinia reunite with her mother. In the process, she accidentally sends Tinia's mom into the Still Force. After this, Tinia does something to Iris and she disappears. The very next episode, Iris comes back like nothing happened. Later in this storyline, Caitlin tries to bring Ronnie back. Barry tries to talk her out of it and help her see the warning signs in the situation. She doesn't listen and calls Barry out for being a hypocrite, because he would go out of his way to do this for Iris. She is right. In episode 15, Barry is contacted by Dion to go find Iris. Joe warns Barry about this, but Barry ignores the warning signs and gets trapped in the Still Force. Anyways, back to Caitlin. She tries to resurrect Ronnie, but ends up giving life to Deathstorm. After Frost beats him, she dies, and Caitlin proceeds to do the exact same thing and try to bring Frost back to life. Bruh. When Barry finds out about this, he nukes her apartment and then leaves. In the very next episode, Barry talks to Joe about how Caitlin isn't returning his calls. He says,
Caitlin still hasn't returned my calls since I stopped her experiment to resurrect Frost.
Joe responds,
You did more than stop it.
We then see a flashback to Barry nuking the apartment. Like, this just happened last episode. We don't need a flashback to remind us of what just happened. You know, actually, every episode in Season 8 has an unnecessary flashback. An example is in 801. Barry is investigating a crime scene with Kristen Kramer. She asks if Barry was a part of the first Royal Flush Gang case, and Barry says no.
First time they pulled a job, I was kinda under the weather.
1. We didn't need that flashback. 2. Why the fuck would Barry lie about the coma? I'm so confused. Anyways, during Season 8, they try to give Iris another storyline. This time, they really spice things up by, guess what? Trapping Iris in the Still Force. They wrote her out of the show again. How creative. It's sad to see that the writers are so bad at giving her a storyline, they just write her out of the show. And keep in mind, during Season 8, everyone knows she is missing, but nobody cares. They all gather at Joe's house to play Dungeons and Dragons. Joe, your daughter is missing. Barry, your wife is missing. The show is usually very particular when it comes to sound design. Every speedster has their own whoosh sound when they're running. In Season 2, Zoom's whoosh is caused by Velocity 9. This is shown in episode 16 when Trajectory takes too much V9 and she overdoses. In Season 5, we meet Godspeed for the first time. He is on V9, but he doesn't make the same whoosh sound. However, When Nora finds out that he's on V9, the whoosh sound changes to the V9 one. From that point on, Godspeed always has the V9 sound effect. After giving August an actual connection to the Speed Force, Godspeed still has the V9 sound effect, instead of the original sound effect they used. Speaking of lightning, after Season 6, lightning became the Speedster's main attack, even against other Speedsters. This is dumb because 1, they can just super speed punch the villains, and 2, the lightning toss almost never works. Hell, 4 episodes after it's introduced, it's already shown to be ineffective against Zoom. In Season 4, Barry is shown to be faster than his own lightning. Point being, Speedsters can dodge the lightning tosses. It's also just blatantly a waste of time and energy. It's also obvious that it's the show's way of avoiding actual fights, but a good speedster fight or a creative use of their speed would be much better than the lazy lightning toss. The MCU even managed to have a better speedster fight in Eternals. In It's All Negative, Barry and Thawne have this massive final battle where they are each using all 4 of the forces against each other. In this fight, Barry uses the Sage Force to basically teleport. This stems from the ability to make realistic illusions. Anyways, the point is, what was the illusion? Was Barry just making Thawne think that he was standing right there? If so, why use an illusion? Just use the Strength Force to punch him, and then use the Still Force to send him away. It would have been so much simpler. Also, during Armageddon, Barry and Co. save Thawne's life by severing his connection to the negative Speed Force. They do this by having Barry hit him with a lightning blast so powerful it overloads his cells and he loses his speed. Back to It's All Negative, Barry has 2 moments where he is shooting lightning at Thawne as if he's Palpatine. One is at the start of episode 20, when Thawne taunts Barry about his mother and Iris' death. The other is during the final battle. Both times, instead of severing Thawne's connection to the Speed Force, Barry just uses the lightning as an attack. Thawne literally wouldn't pose any threat if Barry just severed the connection again. During this storyline, the negative forces reveal that Barry severing Thawne's connection to the negative Speed Force is the reason why they're attacking. They say that Barry attacked them first. However, Iris got her time sickness during Season 7, an entire storyline before Armageddon happened. It was revealed that Iris' time sickness stemmed from negative tachyons in her system, which implies that the negative forces gave it to her. Point being, the negative forces attacked Iris before Barry severed Thawne's speed. Anyways, speaking of Thawne, when he stabs Godspeed, Barry has a moment where he absolutely destroys Thawne in terms of speed. Barry moves so fast that Thawne looks like he's standing still. If Thawne was able to beat Godspeed, and Barry is able to beat Thawne, why couldn't Barry beat Godspeed? Thawne's help was unnecessary and only ended up causing Armageddon. Anyways, that's everything I can think to put in this video, but if I come up with more, I will add them to my video on Season 9. In the end, I don't know how to feel about this show. On one hand, there are so many issues with it. The writing, the consistency, the effects, they all took serious hits as the show went on. There are so many moments that are really good, but when push comes to shove, the actual storylines aren't. On the other hand, this is the same show that I would watch religiously back when it came out. Every week I would do my homework and wait for the next episode. After each episode, I would rush back to my computer to watch the trailer for the next one. It's sad to see that the show has fallen so far. There's only 1 season left, and by the time you're watching this, it will have already started. Hell, maybe it's already finished. I will be making a video on that after it all comes out, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, my view on this show as a whole is conflicted. There are so many moments and things that are so bad, but then there are moments that are written genuinely well, or where the music hits just right. Or where the acting is phenomenal, and nothing beats that genuine nostalgia I have whenever I remember how much joy I used to get from watching The Flash every week. Overall, as much as I can complain about this show, it still holds a special place in my heart, and all I can do is hope that the final season is able to give the show a satisfying conclusion. That being said, I have covered the whole show up to this point. Stay tuned for my video on Season 9, and let me know in the comments below what you thought of this. Do you agree with me, or do you disagree? I want to hear your thoughts. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!